That's so sweet that you baked and brought something.
Hello, everybody.
You know what? I was on both of them too. I wasn't that good enough of a cook. I think that's so sweet.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emma. Thank you so much for coming today. We're going to get started with our book talk, and we can fade into a signing line and tea party afterwards, and you can hang out and take your time and drink your tea and get your book signed. But in the meantime, thank you so much for coming and supporting your local bookstore on Bookstore Romance Day. We are very excited about this, and your attendance and your book purchases and everything like that just allows us to continue to do stuff like this. So we're very grateful. This afternoon we have the honor of hearing from two wonderful romance writers. We have Martha Waters and Sarah Ruiz. And Martha Waters is the author of the Regency Vows series. She was born and raised in sunny South Florida and is a graduate of UNC at Chapel Hill. She lives in coastal Maine, where she works as a children's librarian. And Sarah Grunder Ruiz is the author of two novels, Loveless and Fancy Ships and Luck and Last Resorts. Originally from South Florida, she now lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, with her husband and two children. She holds an MFA in creative writing from North Carolina State University, where she now teaches first year.
Yeah, I know there's some of you out there.
And just thank you again. Remember to grab a copy of one of these titles up at the front if you would like, and enjoy.
Or you could try all of them. Hey, Mark. Hi, Sarah. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to hang out with us for Bookstore Romance Day.
It's so exciting. I've never done a Bookstore Romance Day thing in person before. So
I know. When you emailed me, I was like, an excuse to get away from my kids on a Saturday?
an excuse to leave really pleasant Maine weather and then come sweat.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about that too much. Fun fact, Sarah and I have met in person before, but not actually when I lived here. We've hung out in Boston before, but never in North Carolina.
Live.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But when Martha sent me a text, I was like, oh my god, because we have the same area code.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I was like, what?
Yeah, so we're both in the same. 561. Yeah, we're both in the same part of Florida, and then both ended up in North Carolina, and then I left because I hate Maine.
She abandoned me, which was fine, even though you weren't here then.
Yeah.
I still can't consider it being abandoned.
Yeah.
So I suppose we're going to talk a little bit about romance.
Yeah, our very well planned out conversation.
This is going to be casual. You're basically like, we were going to get lunch, and then my life spiraled out of control, as it often does. And I was like, I can't make it to lunch. So basically, you're getting to hang out with us while we're kind of like catching up.
So we have no idea what we're going to talk about. So I would say lower your expectations, and then you'll be pleasantly surprised. It's going to be really terrible.
Good plan. So let's talk about how you got into romance. I mean, you started reading romance earlier than I did. Did you know you wanted to write romance from the start?
Well, I wanted to write for kids and teens, which is like unsurprising being a children's librarian. And then when I was in library school, I took a popular materials class where we had to read a book from a different genre each week. Yeah, it was actually really fun. Well, actually, it turns out I hate most genres, but like Westerns, not for me. If you love them, congratulations. I do not. I don't want to read about horses. Unless they're pulling a carriage.
Casa House.
Fair enough. Yeah. If it's Ken, then sure. But yeah, and so we did romance one week, and on the advice from my boss at the time, Karen, I read a Julia Quinn book.
Thanks for Karen. Thank you, Karen.
And I read a Julia Quinn book, and I was like, wow, this is really, really funny and charming and delightful. And then I read her entire backlist, which is like 25 years of books over the course of like 2 months. Which I was going through a rough time, so I really didn't like my job at the time because I moved to Florida, which I'm from there. It's a nice place for some people. Yeah, no, I would not recommend going back. Anyway, so I just read a lot of romance that year, and then I was still trying to get like YA books published, which was not going well because I really just like to write the part where the characters were talking to each other and like
Dialogue
bantering.
is the most fun part.
Right. Well, it turns out if you're writing like a YA fantasy, they want plot, and I really struggled with that. I don't know. It was really alarming.
No, thank you.
So I couldn't get an agent, and I was like, no, I'm reading all these romance novels, so maybe I should try writing one. So I did. And here we are.
And now it's like the best part of writing a romance novel is writing the banter.
Yes. Oh, 100% agree.
Yeah. So Like, I think it really fits that you kind of found your place.
Yeah, once I realized there was a genre where like 80% of the book was people just sitting around in the same room like talking, I was like, oh, these are my people.
And I think that kind of speaks to, I think when you think of how do women interact with each other, what do we enjoy, or adults maybe, I don't know what men do. Do
Honestly, not interested.
No offense to the men. Hey. But I know, like, when I was a kid, what does my mom do? Why, my mom, can we leave? Because every time she finds one of her friends, they're just talking.
So
and now that I'm an
annoying.
adult, I'm like, oh, I would just love to hang out with my friends and talk. And my daughter is now like, Mom, all you do with your friends is talk. I'm like, that's all I do when you're around.
My mom would talk on the phone for so long, and it was a landline, and like no one could call me because she was talking to her friends, and I was like, hello, you're like 40, what are you doing? Like, you're a mom. It turns out women like to talk about things.
Yeah.
It's good, it's healthy.
Yeah. I accidentally started writing romance so I would say that my first book, Loveless and Fancy Ships, is really more women's fiction with some romance. I wrote women's fiction before.
I would describe it as my librarian hat on. I would describe it as women's fiction with a romantic subplot, and also I think people call that book a rom-com, and let me tell you,
No.
I cried a lot when I read it. So
Yeah. People also call this one a rom-com, and I was like, you're gonna be very upset.
it is rom-com-ier. There's no like.
Is it though? I think that one's funnier. This one is more romance. This one's funnier.
But
Both will make you cry.
But then I think this one's sadder though.
Yeah.
We're really selling them.
Listen here. Listen. I mean, some people like to cry. Martha.
I mean, I like to cry while writing my own books about how stressed I am about writing them, so that's great.
That's true. I will say my book coming out in January. You can pre-order it.
Last Call at the Local. I've read it. It's really good.
People are always like, what's with the L's? I'm like, honestly, it's just like trolling. I don't really have anything for L's.
Did you come up with your titles yourself? For
Okay.
your books?
Okay, let's talk about the real tea in this room. So, did I come up with the titles? Yes. Did I have final say on them? No. So, I
Don't tell anyone. I really hate the title of this book.
and someone was like, there's only one list in this book. And I'm like, false, there are two. In chapter 1, Nina has a list for a picnic. Okay.
So it's not false advertising.
It's not false, but so basically the book was originally called XO Joe because the main character's named Joe.
Blog, right?
She writes a blog and it signs it off XO Joe. And as soon as when my agent called, she's like, you got a book deal? I'm like, yeah, I'm like crying. I hadn't eaten all day and I was like sweating and gonna pass out. And my husband had just left the house knowing I was gonna get a phone call today. Anyway, that's beside the point. But she was like, yeah, but you're gonna have to change the title. And I was like, oh God. So I just would send ideas for titles to my editor. And she's like, no, maybe. She's like, we need like something with like that conveys boats and like romance. And I was like, okay. So we finally like agreed to like, okay, there was one day where I was so desperate, I sent her an email that was just a list of yacht puns. And like it or yacht. Yacht what I was expecting. So she rightfully completely ignored that email. And she does not ignore my emails, but that one she did, and that was the right thing to do. And eventually we had there were 5 ideas that she was like, yeah, let's ask the team. Loveless and Fancy Ships was my least favorite of all 5, and so they unanimously chose that one. And at that point, I was like, I don't care if I guess I'm glad it has a title. The problem is that Instagram, because I like to caption things for accessibility, thinks it's loveless, like no love. Oh. And I was like, ouch. With Luck and Last Resorts, that was almost not the title. My editor did not like it. At first, she's like, it doesn't convey romance. And I was like, it's gonna have a cover, right? I love you, Carrie. She's in England. It's not gonna be she already knows all these things. And Luck and Last Resorts was probably one of the first titles I had for it. And she was like, I just don't know, there's no romance. But I wasn't allowed to use the word love. So I was like, okay,
Because it was in the first one?
Yeah, so like love and last resorts was one of the ideas. And she's like, you can't use the word love, but you need to convey romance. And I was like, well, Lust is going to give the wrong idea here. Have they been secretly banging in the laundry room of a yacht for 10 years? Yeah. But it's not a really sexual book. It's a fairly faked book. But I was just like, Carrie, I don't have any ideas. Like, that's all I got. And they're like, we need a title like tomorrow. And I was like, well, she's like, fine, I guess I'll ask the team. My editor's amazing, I love her. No, sincerely, this is the only thing we fight about.
It's a safe space.
And she's like, yeah, they love it. And I was like, of course they do.
It's fine. When I was titling this one, they rejected all my ideas, which I'm not very good at titles, and I know this.
Titles are the worst.
Oh yeah, like I would rather light myself on fire than come up with a book title. Probably not, but maybe. I don't know. Never tried. I mean, I've tried titling books. I haven't tried lighting myself on fire. I'm not gonna try. Anyway, it's all hypothetical. Anyways, this one involves fake haunting, and so I had all these like haunting ideas for titles that I thought were funny, like To Haunt and To Hold, and they were like, no, that's too similar to Have and To Hope, so people will cannot possibly distinguish between two H titles. Like that's confusing.
I mean,
my sister was like, what about In Haunting and In Health? And I was like, oh, that's adorable. And so we sent it to my editor, and she was like, let me take it to the team. And they were like, that's extremely confusing. And we were like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, it's not actual, there's not like a real ghost, is there? And I was like, well, no, but like, everyone's read my other books, like they're all historical. Also, it literally says on the back of the book that it's
Martha,
not real.
you're seeing people read the back of the book, which if you're an author, you know that most people don't, and it's okay. I'm writing a book based on the cover.
I also have started reading more books recently without reading the back copy, and it's like
Good
an
choice.
exciting adventure, honestly. I'm like, wow, someone's dead. Wow, someone's kidnapped. Wow, there's like a secret husband from the past. Who knew? Not I, because I didn't read the back cover. But yeah, so they shot down. My agent and I like brainstormed like 20 different book title ideas that all had like spook or like scare or something. We're like, oh, they're kind of funny, and everyone was like, oh no, we cannot possibly assume that the readers will understand that this is like not a paranormal romance. And I was like,
It's gonna have a cover, right?
this cover?
It's gonna have a cover, right?
There are no ghosts. I do draw ghosts in all the ones I sign, so
Ooh, it's a fun little tidbit.
they look like Pac-Man ghosts.
Oh.
Like they're not
Okay,
they're not good
I love a
ghosts.
good Pac-Man ghost. So.
Yeah, I drew cats in all the copies of this one that I've signed, and
Now-
their tails get weirdly
You're gonna make
chubby.
me look bad. I don't draw any pictures.
Yeah, but you have actual artistic talent, and I don't.
What are you talking about?
I've seen your Instagram. You can do things.
Don't tell the people.
Anyway, how did you start reading and writing romance?
I wrote Loveless and Fancy Ships, and my best friend's a librarian, and she's also my beta reader. She's Beta Reader Danny. If you follow me on Instagram, you know about Beta
I'm
Reader
familiar with
Danny.
her notes.
She's hilarious. The only reason I write books is to get her comments on my drafts. She does drag me, and that's fine. She can do that because she has earned her place. But she was like suggesting books that were romances that kind of had the vibe of what I was doing. And it's kind of funny because as I was reading, so I wrote a book before Loveless and Fancy Ships that did not sell. It's how I got my agent. It was a women's fiction novel, and everyone was like, meh. And I was like, you're right. Not at that point, but now I'm like, okay.
I'm
Yeah,
sure that was not your reaction
it
at
was
the time.
more like literary women's fiction. And there was one editor who liked it and tried to get her team to buy it, and they're like, no.
How it goes in
That's
publishing.
how it goes. They're just like, pretty much. Yeah. And
That's happened to me.
yeah, and she got on the phone with me. We talked and we did like a revise and resubmit. So I revised it, resubmitted it, and she was like, "Wow, I love the revisions." And then her team was like, "Meh."
That's fine. For my debut, we had a revise and resubmit offer from an editor, and she's going to get back to us with like her specific suggestions. Or revise and resubmit is when they're like, we don't want to buy this, but if you make these changes, then maybe we'll buy it. And she started trying to write the letter explaining what she wanted me to revise, and then she sent a follow-up email to my agent being like, actually, it's just a no.
And look at you
And I was
now.
like, wow, I feel great about myself now.
Wow, that's brutal.
Yeah. It's like, I kind of liked it, and then I thought about it more, and then I decided, I just can't help you. Like, I don't even know what you should, like, you've done so much wrong here that I can't even tell you what you should fix. So I was like, okay,
Wow, we were going through it. Well,
Yeah, that's great. I love being on submission. It's really fun.
it's the worst. And what I realized is I was working on Loveless and Fancy Ships, and I was like, man, that editor would be a great editor for this book. And she's now my editor. So that was like a yay, happy ending.
Like a romance.
So like a romance. And so once I wrote Loveless and Fancy Ships, or as I was writing, I was like, oh, that's what romance is. Cool, I'm gonna start reading it. Just because I just never had been exposed to romance novels other than the ones that my grandma like kept like putting away, but they were like cowboy romances, which sound great in theory. And I have not read one, but maybe I will. And so for Luck and Last Resorts, I was like, I know what romance is now. Here's a romance novel. It's very angsty. And then for the book coming out in January, I was like, I need to atone for all the tears I have caused. So here's a rom-com.
It really is a rom-com.
It really is this time, guys.
I can confirm. I would not lie. It is a rom-com.
It is.
And it's set in Ireland, so you'll spend the entire book being like, wow, I really want to just live inside this book. It's at a pub in Ireland.
How do you feel about hot tattooed Irishmen with cats? I hope you feel good about it.
Yeah, I just feel like that's such an interesting, because your first book came out 2020.
November 2021.
Yeah, so mine came out April 2020.
April 2020. Yeah, like the worst time to have a book come out.
Strongly do not recommend. Whenever I talk to a debut who's freaking out, I'm like, well, so long as like there's not actually a global pandemic that starts like 2 weeks before your book comes out, it probably won't be that
but
bad.
But also now we would be like,
and yeah,
I feel like it'd be like, girl, more time to read. Except not.
No,
Probably not.
There probably will be another pandemic at some point when I have a book coming out.
Yeah. Stop writing books, Martha. No, don't, please.
But yeah, I think it's an interesting time to start publishing romance. I feel like the genre has really reached a lot of new readers just in the past like 5 years or so. And I mean, obviously, I think that a large part of that is due to like just the way they're being marketed. I don't feel like the content is changing that much. It's changing in terms of just getting slowly more inclusive, but in terms of like the basic structure, like there's no difference between this and like a mass market historical from like the 90s, other than maybe it's like the hero is a little bit less domineering, because I don't really like that. Also, like no one like shoots anyone, which happens.
I feel like we need more.
Listen, if you want a good time, Lord of Scoundrels, Loretta Chase, the heroine shoots the hero. It was published in like 1995. It is, in my opinion, one of the greatest romance novels ever, and it is completely unhinged. Like,
I need to read that.
Oh,
Unhinged is my jam.
There was a few like kind of problematic things about it because it was 1995. But no, the heroine shooting the hero is not the problematic part. That is a delightful part. Like I don't like guns. I'm very anti-gun, but I'm very pro women in the 1800s shooting men. Like, this is great. I'm being honest. I think I'll do my next book. I don't know. Just add that to the list. Wow, where was I going with this?
I don't know. I was trying to remember that while you were talking.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah. So the content has not really changed. It's just the way they're marketing it. And I feel like it's so interesting watching a lot of my friends who are not romance readers, like this time 5 years ago, like read almost entirely romance now. And it is fascinating to me.
I also think, your book came out April 2020. I think
I remember.
had a lot to do with it, with wanting to read, okay, I don't know where the world is going right now, and everything is kind of scary, but I know this book is going to have a happy ending, and I think that's why the rise of the rom-com, it's like, I don't want to read heavy, depressing stuff. That's just my life.
It was interesting. I signed with my literary agent in 2018, and they do like an agency newsletter, and I remember in like one of the very first newsletters they sent, they like had just gone to New York and had a bunch of meetings with editors about like what was selling and stuff, and they were like, so post 2016 election, like a lot of rom-coms got really popular, kind of like Helen Lang and Jasmine Guillory, and their books came out like post 2016.
Suddenly dystopians were not interesting.
So strange. Like,
how could that be?
Bizarre. And yeah, they were kind of like, we don't see any evidence that this is like going to change at any time. I think it is like slowly starting to change a little bit now, but that was like 5 years ago. So I think it's been a pretty long-lasting trend, honestly.
I feel like angst is on the rise, and I'm like, why wasn't that true in 2021? In November of 2021. That's right. It's fun.
I mean, my next book coming out is like February 6th. You can pre-order it. we're contractually, not really, but basically contractually obligated
I'm
to
literally
pre-order.
you to pre-order my book. And
our publishers will yell at us if we don't say that at every opportunity. My next one is probably my angstiest book, and it's like not saying much.
So, like, on a scale from Last Call at the Local, my least angstiest book, to Luck and Last Resort, to my most angstiest book, where are we with To Woo and To Wed?
Closer to Last Call at the Local. I don't do angst. It's a second chance romance though, so there's a lot of like signing. I know. I told a mutual friend of ours, Sarah, who just read it. Like I was like,
Sarah Hogue.
Yeah, she writes incredible.
Buy all her books. She is amazing.
She wrote You Deserve Each Other. Her next one's called Old Flames
and New Fortunes. It's so good.
I keep changing the title. I keep getting confused.
I know. I was like, oh, I love the cover for Fates. I was like, wait, that's not the name. That's not the name of the book. Sorry, I meant.
Anyway, I was warning her before she read it. I was like, it's like, not that angsty. And she was like, what are you talking about? I'm like crying over here. And I was like, oh. Well, I don't think it's that angsty. It's just like a little angsty.
It's a good book.
And there's like a lot of sex in it. Not really, but more than my normal books.
You're really selling me on your next book. I gotta tell you.
You'll cry, and they won't have sex till like 80% of the way.
Yes.
But then
Torture me for most of the book.
It's good times. What was the point about it?
I don't know. Oh, romance. How we got into it. It took us 200 minutes to talk about it. I mean, how many of you are newer romance readers?
Like past like 4 or 5 years.
Okay, where's my pre-COVID romance? But look at all of you. Hello, coming out of the woodwork.
I think it's so interesting because so many romance authors that I know, like their like romance reader origin story is like stealing the books from like their mom or grandma's like nightstand or something, and I'm like, oh,
my mom was reading Clan of the Cave Bears and Flowers in the Attic, and she was like, yeah, you can borrow my books. I'm in 6th grade. So that's probably why I didn't discover romance. I was reading other kind of. That explains the vibes.
My mom and I had very different reading tastes, so there were like no romance novels in my house growing up. And my grandma just reads like a lot of mysteries, so I feel like I didn't have a like saucy nightstand to read as a child during my formative years. I read some fanfic. Maybe that should have been my like first sign. Like, oh,
I wasn't in the fanfic world either.
I just wanted to read about the characters kissing because no one kissed in any of the like children's books.
Not enough.
So weird, right? I was like, that's boring.
No, but now I'm like, well, my children will have plenty of, they're probably just going to be like, ew. Oh, okay, here's the thing. When you teach college students and they find out you write romance novels, that's interesting. Sometimes they ask me questions and I'm like, please don't ask me that question. But also, if you don't want to read a sex scene written by your English professor, maybe don't read her romance novels. That's your problem.
My grandma read my first book and she was like, after a while, she's a pretty slow reader, so it took a while after it came out, and she was like, it was kind of saucy, and I was like, it's a romance novel. She's like, it's not, Georgette Hayer's books aren't saucy, and I was like, these were written in like the 1930s, man.
I can one-up you. My brother-in-law's a Catholic priest. He actually loves my books. He just finished Luck and Last Resorts, and they're pretty tame. I was like, please don't read Last Call at the Local. It's a little spicier.
I've had this horrifying thing happen to me since I moved to Maine, where it's like, here I was already like, I knew a lot of people, and when I got a book deal, like word kind of spread that I had like, ooh,
celebrity around town.
No, but sure. No, but Maine isn't really interesting because I haven't lived there that long and people don't know this, and I keep having this really horrifying thing happen where I'll just be sitting innocently at the children's desk, like, planning a story time, living my best life, and like a mom will walk in, brandish my book at me and be like, you wrote this? And I'll be like,
listen, I love attention. Please I wrote that.
It's horrifying, but it's okay. If they've already read it, then I'm like, okay, clearly they've read the book, they are aware of the
content.
Yeah, the content, and they feel comfortable having a conversation with me after the fact. That's fine. I don't like when people come in and are like, oh, you wrote this. I'm checking it out. I'm like, oh, please don't. There's a 70-year-old man who brings his granddaughter to the library a lot, and his wife, he's like, I'm gonna check it out for my wife, and I was like, oh, great.
My grandpa told me my first book was good for a book that's for women. I was like, thanks, Grandpa. Appreciate that.
My dad reads them, which I don't like to think about. And he reads a lot of nonfiction. He's like, yeah, yours are they're a lot more fast paced. They're very entertaining. And I was like, we're comparing them to like 800-page history nonfiction.
Yeah,
like it's a pretty low bar to clear, but sure, I'll take it. Whatever.
Maybe you could like read more in that genre. Yeah.
Yeah, I doubt that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I'll start giving him 10 for Christmas.
My husband reads all my books. He loves them. And he's like, oh, have you read this romance novel? I'm like, no. I think he reads more than I do. And this is a man who didn't read one book in the first 10 years I knew him. All of a sudden, he read like 50 books a month.
Whoa.
I know. I was like, are you okay? And he was like, obviously not.
How much else are we talking?
I don't know.
I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, what's our time looking like?
If anyone has any questions to ask, we can maybe do that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Then you guys are good.
I have no concept of time.
You guys come up with the
idea. Question. I was like, I do not know how long
It's
we've
the
been talking.
ADHD
Like,
for me.
I'm just like, once I start talking, it's just like, whoa, and then like 20 minutes later,
How do
I'm
you
like,
think my
oh,
students feel?
just me during story time.
I'm sure they have lots of questions.
You mentioned earlier that you guys both love the banter and like writing the dialogue, but I also know that it's like very common that people are like, oh, I can't write people talking. It's like so challenging. So I guess like, did it just come easy to you? Did you like have to train or like what? Like think about it?
Whenever someone asks me how I write the dialogue in my books, I'm like, I literally have no idea. I just sit down and then like word vomit comes out of my fingers, and then like usually I'm like, wow, that was really bad. Then I go back and read it, and I was like, oh no, actually that was pretty good. I'm not going to edit that at all. And then I send it to my editor, and she's like, oh, this is funny, and I'm like, great, thanks, I'm a genius.
Wow, your process is different from mine. I would say that first, it's pretty much that, except I read it, I'm like, wow, that really is pretty bad.
Everything else I write is bad. Like everything else gets like
dialogue,
aggressively
yeah.
edited, but the dialogue is like by far the least edited things in
I
the
will
book.
say that like some characters have a different approach than others, and some are easier than others. So Loveless and Fancy Ships, there are some teens and tweens in the book. And when I was initially writing some of the dialogue, like I'm like now I'm in my 30s, but at that time I was late 20s. Like I don't sound like maybe I do sound like a teen. Actually, I did teach middle school, so I'm a teen at heart. But I realized, like, wow, this 16-year-old is sounding far too, like, adult. So what I would do is I would take all the kids' lines of dialogue, like ones I was working on, and I would just write it down somewhere. And then I'd be like, I'm going to think about this line. And if I were a teenager, like, what would I put here? And I would just like be doing the dishes and just like thinking about it and then work on that line. And for me, what I love about dialogue is that people don't typically say exactly what they're thinking. So when I'm writing dialogue, I think, okay, what are they really thinking? What do they want to convey to the other person? What do they not want the other person to hear? And then what are they actually saying? And all of those things are a little bit different. Now with one of the tweens in the book, Grayson, she has 80. She's a 13. Yeah, she's 13. Wow, I can't remember. I think she's 13 and she has ADHD. With her, and this is funny, I was not diagnosed with ADHD when I wrote this book. Yet, it's like, Sarah, come on. I based Grayson off of myself as a child at that age, though she's athletic and I am not. And did not do well in school, and I didn't. But I was like, yeah, same vibes here. So when I would write Grayson, I would just be like, okay, inner child Sarah, have at it. And it's like, all the congressmen are reptilian aliens. And I'm like, whoa. And it wasn't until like I was revising that book that I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I was like, you based a character off of yourself who has ADHD, and you didn't figure it out? Or did I? So yeah, dialogue is kind of easy. Once you get the character, like that's the easiest part is the dialogue, the back and forth.
Oh, for sure.
Like, there's a lot of cut dialogue.
Yeah, I had that problem too. And then I have a lot of like, I'm like, oh, maybe I should like add something where like to remind us of like where they are and what they're doing, and if they inhabit like human bodies.
Do I have to have descriptions and plot?
I don't like it. And it's also interesting, so when I was writing my first book, I was very much like, I'm writing a historical romance, so they must sound like they did in the Regency. I don't know what accent that is.
Yeah, I don't
sorry. And I was just kind of like, I was very inspired by all the other Regencies that I'd read, and I was trying to sound, I wasn't trying to sound like in a Jane Austen book or anything, because that's just not really what historical
the
romances
vibe.
sound like,
It's not
really.
the vibe.
But it is interesting because when I like started getting feedback from agents and like from editors and stuff, they're like, what we really love about this is that they don't sound very historical. Like they sound pretty contemporary, like they're in a historical book. And I was like, so I failed at the thing I was trying to do. So that's great. But now that I'm like aware of this more, I think I'm like, I lean into it. It's actually really interesting reading, especially like if I read the prologue of this one, which changed very little in edits. I can like see in the dialogue. I'm like, oh, that's not how I would have written that now. Like, and now I just lean
And
more
that's
into
why we
like,
don't read our books.
oh yeah, no, I would like no, I've never read any of them.
Listen to my audiobooks a lot.
I've
But that's
never
because
listened.
Carissa is so talented.
I think my audiobook narrators are great. I listen to 30 seconds of each one to say, oh wow, they're so talented. I have to turn this off now. Like, I would just be so mortified that someone is actually reading the words that I put on the page, which I realize is like the
point.
idea.
Yeah.
But it's like how Violet and James, the hero and heroine of the first book, those are two of my favorite baby names, and I was like, oh, that was dumb. I'm ever unfortunate enough to have children. No offense to any children, but like, I love them. Not for me personally. I'm like, but if I wanted to, that was dumb. And then my friends were like, well, why did you do that? And I was like, well, because obviously I didn't think the book would actually get published. And they were like, well, then why were you writing it? And I was like, well, to get it published.
Yeah.
But I just didn't think it would actually happen.
Surprise!
Try to ignore it. I think that's the hardest thing about writing once you get one published is like you have the undeniable knowledge that people actually will read it.
I prefer that.
No, I hate it. I makes me want to die.
Any other questions? They're like, don't get us out of here. Yeah.
So I have two questions. One, what are your favorite romance authors to read? And then two, I loved hearing about how the titles are sort of somewhat yours to decide, somewhat the editors. What is it like for the cover art?
Oh,
And I'm curious your thoughts on the cartoon characters becoming really popular as opposed to like human, actors who are in photo shoots.
Okay. What was the first one?
oh, favorite romance to read.
Favorite romances to read. I mean, I love Martha's.
Sarah's my favorite author.
Okay, our friend Sarah Hogel, I adore her books. They're just like
Really
off
funny.
the walls. If you just want to be like, wow, this is unhinged, just go get her book.
She has a really strong voice also, which I really value. I've come to realize as a
You're either
reader,
gonna
like,
love it or hate it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I have to love them because she's a really strong voice.
Yeah.
I read a lot of historicals, obviously.
I love Tessa Dare.
I love Tess Dare's really funny. I did a really big deep dive into all of Julianne Long's historicals over the past couple of years, and her longest and most famous series is the Pennyroyal Green series, and I am obsessed with them. They're so good. Yeah, I think she possibly is maybe the most talented historical author currently writing. I read her books and I'm just like, oh, I'm bad. Why am I even bothering?
I think Bridget Morrissey is so underrated.
Yeah, hers are really good.
Her book, That Summer Feeling.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And what was the road trip one from last year?
1,000 Miles.
Oh my god, you're good. Remember? I don't remember the title
She's my
of any
favorite.
book I ever read. It's a real problem. I'm like that one where they did the thing, and I'm like, that's not helpful. I don't know what you're talking about.
Queer Adult Summer Camp, Bridget Morrissey's latest book. Sign me up.
Yeah, she's really good. I really in the contemporary space, I really love Talia Hibbert's stuff a lot
Yeah.
because the banter is just so funny. They're just so sharp and so smart. And Lucy Parker also writes really incredible contemporary romance, which I think has had maybe the best dialogue I've ever read in romance novels. And
The
that's what I'm here
Birdman
for.
Brothers series.
I still haven't read those. I read her. I know. Well, because there's so many of them, and I get intimidated, and the last one's coming out. I'm just gonna wait and read them all once the last one's out.
I am really mad at Chloe that she's left my favorite character for last.
That's what she gotta do.
And I was like, this book's next, right? And she was like, no. And I was like, evil.
That's how you do it with a series.
And so the covers, I mean, I think that depends on your publisher.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it works for you.
They basically send. Well, so it's interesting because when I was writing mine, I assumed they'd be published in mass market, smaller size with a traditional kind of romancy cover. Because at that point they were doing this the big trade paperback illustrated cartoon covers for contemporary romance, like Sally Thorne and things like that. But they weren't really doing them for historicals at all. It was after my book sold that E.B. Dunmore's first book came out, and that was the first historical I had seen that had trade paperback packaging with the cartoon cover. But yeah, like basically as soon as like my agent was like, oh yeah, I'm envisioning them publishing this in like trade, like with the like to have more like crossover appeal is the idea, which I think is clearly working. Like
Yeah, I think
the genre is expanding a lot. I honestly though, they just send me like cover art sketches, and I think I've gotten really lucky because I haven't had that many notes for them. Like I usually send back a few things, like on that one's not up here, on To Love and to Loathe. The heroine's hand looked like a flipper. Like, I don't know, it looked like a flipper. They had drawn the fingers, but it just looked really flippery, like holding on to like the picture frame on the cover. And I was like, this is a really weird note, but can we make it not look like a flipper? And they were like, oh, interesting. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. And that one also, I had to ask them to change the characters' hair colors because they're still wrong because I couldn't like it as much as I wanted, but they did fix that a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think I've gotten really lucky. Like my agent's always like, if you really hate a cover, I still don't know if we can do anything about it, but I can at least like go to bat for you. And I'm like, no, honestly, I feel like I like them. I just have a few notes. So
I have a lot to say. What's the is Atria like the you're at Atria, right?
yeah, Simon and Schuster.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm at Berkeley, which is Penguin Random House. We have a lot of say in our covers. So, like a year before a book comes out, my editor will send me an email like, want to send me some ideas you have for the cover of the book? And I'm like, oh, the book I haven't finished writing? Sure. Usually by then, I do have ideas. And it's like, here's some covers that I like. Here's some that I don't like, which that's a spicy file to find. I was like, my least favorite covers are like blue. So, you know. That's what I get for writing a book about boats. And one of the books that I really love is Tie Set Tether by Jane Iga.
Oh yeah,
it has this beautiful black woman with her big sunglasses. I was like, vibes. And I liked Lasting Standing's cover, another disembodied head with sunglasses. I assumed I was gonna get some people just like chilling on a boat. So when I got a sketch for this, I was like, oh my god. But the initial sketch, so I get like a black and white sketch, and they're like, what do you think? And I'm like, say a few things. On the initial sketch for this, there was like a hand on her shoulder. And I was like, whose hand is that? Also, is she gonna get murdered? I know, I was like, this is maybe not giving the vibes. Like, I'm worried about her. Like, is it her dead nephew's ghost? Is it the love interest? Like, and they're like, yeah. Also, and I still think her forehead's a little bit big, which I'm like, I have a 5 head too, I get it. But I was like, can we just give her some more hair? And they were like, yeah. And then I was like, okay, I can't ask for more hair. This one, I was like, I want a clinch cover. I want an illustrated clinch cover. And that's what they did. And I was like, here's specific outfits the characters wear. And here, I actually changed the outfit she wore in this scene to match the cover of the book. Fun fact. People are like, oh my god, it's the dress from like the scene. And I'm like, yeah. I changed the scene. And I love it. I changed artists for the book that's coming out next. They look fairly similar. But that time I got I got 2 options for this one. This one I just got 1. This one I got 2, and it was like the characters in uniform, like below deck style. And then there was this one, and I was like, that one is definitely not the vibes. This one is the vibes. And so that was pretty easy. But with the next book, first they're like, here's like 5 artists, pick one. And I was like, oh my god, stop giving me choices. Oh, I had a meltdown about the font on the cover. I was like, they were like white or black. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, what about, so then I ended up with purple. And then I almost had like an anxiety attack after the decisions were made. I was like, I made the wrong choice. And now it's like, no one cares. So.
That really is the moral of so many things you melt down about. And
the clouds. I was like, did I make the right choice on the clouds? They're like, fluffy clouds or this clouds? I'm like, Colleen, that's the designer. I'm like, please stop giving me choices. And then, so for the next book, it's like, which artist? Pick the artist. And they're like, okay, the artist, here's like 5 options. 4 or 5. And I just sat there and was like, they were all really cool. And I was like, which one's the right one? And like, I would ask everybody. Here's the thing. When you have options, don't ask other people. If you're someone like me, because I'm like, everyone likes this one best, but I really like this one. I went with the one that I like the best. But then they're like, okay, which colors for this color, this color, this color? Stop! So if you haven't seen the cover of the one that's coming out, it's very cute and cozy, and I'm into it. And you can look it up on the internet, I guess. It's on the background of my phone. So if you want to see it, I'll show you my phone. But yeah, I get a lot of say in the cover. Like if I want to change, they'll pretty much do it. Like the original sketch of this one, Ollie had like just a really giant, like abnormally giant chin. And I was like, can we make his face look like not bad?
I feel like the weirdest thing about covers is they're usually doing the cover art like before you finish
Yes.
writing the book. They start doing it so far in advance, and I find that actually really stressful. Because I'll be like, my editor of the past couple books has been like, are there any elements you would like us to include? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, I haven't finished writing the book yet. Like, if I could go back and tell them to add a cat to the cover of Tamarian,
There's a cat on the cover of my next book.
I want a cat on the cover of this book, but it's already published. So barring buying every copy and just like putting a cat on the cover, that's not gonna happen. Not a bad idea. But yeah, this one is the second cover for this book. It was the first printing had a completely different cover.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's purple. It's like they're like silhouettes.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And then they did a different cover for the second book that was more like in this style, and so they went back and like reprinted this one with this. Well, actually, originally they did it for the ebook, and I was like, "This is gonna annoy me for the rest of my life. I can't wait to spend the next 70 years being really annoyed about the fact that they have non-matching covers." But then Bridgerton came out, and they said, "You're the print out this book, so I got new cover printed."
Barnes and Noble can get your cover changed.
It happened to me with the first cover for the first book. It was originally red and not purple, and they said it was too similar to the cover of The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory, and that readers would be perplexed and confused, and then we had to change the color, or Barnes and Noble wouldn't buy it. So
yeah, Barnes and Noble. Oh, that'll be you announced your cover, and they're like, actually.
Yeah, no, we'd already posted. It's still on my Instagram. If you like scroll back like 4 years, like the original cover is there in red, and it's like, oh no, never mind. Barnes and Noble has a weird amount of power for covers. My agent was like, oh god, this has happened so many times to me.
Other questions. We answer questions like they're really very long. Yes.
What made you do like the alliteration for the titles?
I hate myself, I guess. I mean, the next book's last called The Local, and I was like, could I have a short title? Can we just call it The Local? Because, like, also my name's really long. Like, how are we going to fit things on the cover? And they were like, no, that sounds like a murder. I was like, it's going to have a cover. And so last call it The Local it is, which I'm like, all these long titles, but it's just trendy. It's either, you have to either have a pun or alliteration or both. Somehow I avoided the puns.
Because Heaven to Hoax is a pun.
Yeah.
And originally, the original title I sold it under was To Hoax a Husband, and they liked that, but they were like, what if we made it punnier? And they gave me a bunch of options, and I will say when they suggested To Heaven to Hoax,
they suggested the title for you?
Yeah, my editor came.
I was like, someone please just give me.
They seem to have accepted that I'm not good at that, and I really appreciate that. I'm like, I know your strength. I cannot title a book to save my life, so don't ask me to.
My agent and editor are worse at titles than I am.
No, they're mine are better.
My agent was like, for this one, what about Summer Cruising? And I was like, one, it's a yacht. Two, I don't think that means what you think it means. And she was like, what about Love on the Sea? And I was like, are you guys okay? So compared to that, I love this title.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so they went to Heaven to Hoax, and then I was like trapped. I tried to call the second one The Wedding Wager. I was really leaning into that alliteration. I was like, I'm going for it. And my agent was like, well, no. You need to make it match the title for the first one. And I was like, I can't do that. So I sent it out to a group text. One of my friends immediately like, to love and to love. And I was like, oh, you're a genius.
Man, your friends are more useful than mine.
Yeah.
I need to text my group chat and be like, get on.
My editor and I both came up with the title of Tamarian's Medal separately, which was weird.
Yeah.
It's the only one I've actually come up with
Everyone to
myself.
me is just like, Sarah, come up with titles. And they're like, no, we don't like that. No, we don't like
Well,
that.
the title for my final book, which comes out in February, well, not final book, hopefully. I will be retiring. No, my final book in the series, which comes out in February, is To Woo and to Wed. And I like sent a couple title ideas over when I like submitted the like proposal for it, and my editor immediately responds, so actually I've had an idea for the title for this book for 2 years, so I'd like to call it To Woo and to Wed. And I was like, that's fine. Also, nerdy librarian moment. If you put the books in order on the shelf alphabetically by title, you're also putting them in series order.
Wow.
And that really makes me happy. I think I mentioned it in emails to my editor like 3 times to the point that it was getting weird. She was like, "Why is it such a big deal?" And I was like, "You don't understand how annoying it is when you're shelving books at the library." And like, I know what order the Prydain Chronicles go in, but if I put them on the right order for the series on the shelf, they're not going to say that way. Anyway, not important.
Other questions? Yeah.
How hard is it to write a love scene?
Which type of love? Like the kind? Yeah. I've only written like 1.5. Hard to say. I'm trying to think because they're pretty like.
Yeah.
This one there's nothing. No, there's too many teenagers in this book, and that's actually one of the things. The only note I didn't
Not
take.
the main character.
What I mean is, there's too many teens around for them to have a love scene. So that's the one note. My editor was like, "Shouldn't we like mention that they banged?" And I was like, "Carrie, when did they have time to bang?" And that's the only thing I did. This one, like, there's a sex scene in the middle of the book, but it's pretty like big. So it's like more like emotional. And for the third book, I was like, I'm just slowly like adding a little chili pepper to my reading. That one, I was like, you know what? My family's gotten bored of the fact that I publish books. Now we can have something like, woo! I sent it to my beta reader, and she was like, oh my god. I think people who read my first 2 books are going to be like, what?
Pleasantly surprised.
Or very upset. Can't wait for the emails. But was it hard? Yes, but actually, I was like, oh no, the edit, like, because you get notes from your like editor and your copy editor. I was like, oh no, I didn't get it.
My editor has a very light touch with editing sex scenes, and I deeply appreciate this about her. It's possibly my favorite of her many wonderful qualities. When I was writing the first book, I was like, no one's ever going to read this. So I was like, this is fine. It's not hard to write a sex scene. Like, whatever, no big deal. And then after the first one came out, I was like, oh, I made a horrible mistake. I don't know, I think it's a lot of like the main thing is it's not very sexy because it's a lot. You have to keep track of a lot of body parts.
Yeah.
Like, where are the hands? Like, what's it doing with their hands?
I also can't see in my head.
Yeah. Wait.
So,
what?
Sorry. I have aphantasia. I don't see
okay.
it.
I was like, what do you mean?
So I have to like overblock things. So I'm like, then they stood up and then I take a lot of it out because like most people like they don't need that.
Yeah.
I need that to know what's going on. So with sex scenes, that might be a little.
Yeah. Well, wait, what was I about to say? Oh, when I was writing Just Wanted to Spar, spoiler alert, they have sex at one point against the wall, and there's actually and there's a hidden door behind where they're getting busy, and so I was like researching door latches to figure out what kind of latch they could like accidentally bump while.
You have to research that.
Oh, this is not
for
very
one
sexy.
line.
Yeah. But then when I was writing the 5th book, which comes out in February, I entered this weird like fugue state, and then I was reading back through it before I sent it to my editor, and I was like, I'm embarrassed to turn this in, which is not like that sexy, but for me it is, and I was like, I'm gonna have to tone this down. And then she sent back edits, and she didn't edit that scene at all because she seems super. Unless there's something like egregiously wrong with it, she seems to be like, we have an unspoken agreement that we're just not going to spend too much time together and track changes working on sex scenes, which I'm like,
I'm not going to be able to listen to the audiobook of the sex scene for the next one.
I mean, the fact that you listen to your audiobooks at all is astonishing.
Because Carissa Backer is amazing.
I don't want someone to read my words back to me. It's bad enough having to write them in the first place. I mean, I think
I like my own jokes.
I'm hilarious. I still don't want to hear someone read it back to me.
I'm a Taurus. But I don't know actually if that has anything to do with it.
I don't know what that even means.
I'm an Enneagram type 7.
People keep telling me that they can tell that one of my characters is a certain like sign, and I'm like, sure. Whatever. I made a mistake of missing a birthday for one of them, and they were like, oh, that really tracks. And I was like,
listen though.
Oh, wow.
Okay, listen. I picked their birthdays out and I didn't know this stuff, and I looked it up and I was like, oh my god. Astrology is real, even with fictional characters.
People, when I do like Zoom book clubs, they'll be like, okay, so we know that Emily's I don't know, whatever it is.
What's her birthday?
June something.
Is she a Cancer? No.
I don't know anything about it. I thought I was Sagittarius for my entire life, but it turns out I'm a Capricorn because I'm on the cusp. And then my sister was like, we need to look up a Capricorn, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at your blah, blah, blah. Word vomit. I'm like, this is fake, but sure. And she's like, well, you're a Capricorn, actually.
Yeah, that's
she's
exactly
like,
what a Capricorn would say.
She's like, it makes sense. She's like, all Capricorns dress like preschool teachers,
Capricorn?
so you must be a
We're the
Capricorn.
Capricorns. Yeah. Okay.
She's like, no, no one who's not a Capricorn has that many cardigans. And I was like, this is fake. What are you talking about?
Nina's an Aries, so
I don't know what that means.
you've read about Nina, so
Yeah.
you do know what it means.
Okay, fair.
And Ollie's a Capricorn, so you know, I have to go. Jack, his brother, is a Cancer. Such a Cancer man. My beta reader was like, when's his birthday? I have a theory about his sign. And I was like, oh, it's like July 3rd. And she was like, yeah.
This is fake. Listen.
I don't have anything more to say about it.
It's a bad crowd, bro. I learned that like I don't broadcast these views widely because every romance reader or writer I know seems to be really into astrology, and I feel like the weird kid who doesn't believe
It will come for you. I don't believe in it, but I also do. Just like aliens. Because if I say I believe in them, they'll come and get me.
No,
If
aliens
I
are
say
definitely
that I
real.
don't believe in them, they will come.
No, I mean aliens are definitely real. Like, what are the odds we're the only people in the universe?
This is off topic. Are we out of time? We're doing more questions.
Questions?
Other than, you know,
I don't know why.
okay.
How did you not want to ask more questions? Let me give like intelligent, coherent answers.
Can I get a refund?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do y'all get to go to conferences and stuff and like fangirl over your favorite romance authors, or have you done that yet?
This is a multiple answer question. So the author world's pretty small, so we kind of all get to know one another through the internet.
It's very dangerous.
It's dangerous.
They're all gonna murder us.
So we kind of already know. It's more like I don't know how. Here's my thing. How do the authors know that there are cons? Like Steamy Lit Con was like, what is that and when is it? I don't know how do people know these things?
I think also a thing that maybe the casual reader is not aware of is that most authors that you see going to like conferences
They
and stuff
pay
are
themselves.
paying their own
Yeah.
way to go there, and I like going on real vacations. Like, there are some like conferences that you're published. Like if you're lucky, or if you get an invite, maybe either the conference will pay for you or like the publisher will pay for you to go. But honestly, like the one that's going on right now in California, Steamy Lit Con, I believe most of the authors are paying themselves.
I have never once
so.
been invited to a con that was like a conference. I'm sure I've been conned before, but I haven't been to one, and it's like I don't even know how people know about it.
They asked me to commit really because I got invited to a Polycon, which is one of those ones in DC. I got invited to it for next year. They ask you to commit over a year in advance, which I find really challenging.
I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. I can't commit to anything.
I have a lot going on in my life. I was like, I can't do this. And then I got it. I did get when my first book was coming out. I got invited to the LA Times Festival of Books, which is I would actually love to go to. This is really cool. And my publisher was willing to pay, like they were going to pay for the plane tickets and stuff. But then April 2020. So
no.
still, no.
But do I fan over people and anything? I mean, I fan a little bit when like someone blurbing books.
Yeah.
When Jodi Picoult blurbed Loveless and Fancy Ships, I literally fell off of my couch. I was like, because she emailed me. I emailed her asking, like, this is never happened. She's like, yeah, I'll read it. And I was in a Walgreens, and I was like, and then my dad was like, who is that? And I was like, okay. And then I was like, yeah. She's like, no promises. And then I got an email like a month later, like, here's your blurb. And I was like, and I texted my mom, and then my phone died, and I opened my because it always dies, and I charged it as 20 missed calls, and it's her and her best friend freaking out, and I was like, this was the reaction I wanted, Dad. And my husband was like, who?
I think that an author that you really admire reading your book is definitely a moment where you're like,
yeah,
Julia Quinn. Discussed my book on the stage show, and I was in Scotland on vacation with my friend when I got the email from my publicist telling me this was going to happen, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and she was like, she was trying to brush her teeth, and I was like, oh my god! She was like, it's really early, but this is really exciting, but also what's happening?
Let's make a pact. If either of us goes on a TV talk show, we'll recommend each other's books.
I would rather let myself. Wow, I really do say that a lot. I'm worried about you, Martha. I know I say it a lot, but I'm hearing myself say it a lot. I would rather do a lot of things other than go on a TV talk show because I would probably vomit. I would be so terrified. So hopefully, I only want a marginal level of success. I want enough success that they keep letting me write books and I can buy a villa in France, obviously. Marginal success. But I don't want them to ask me to do anything go on a talk show or interact with people.
I want to be one of the ones, but I don't want to be the one. You know what I
Did you
mean?
see that event Emily Henry did this somewhere where they had her come to like a Major League Baseball game, and like people got to like do a meet and greet with her at a. I was like, that's too. I don't want this. Like, I this is horrifying to me. Also, what if they made you throw the baseball?
No
That's
offense.
really my deepest fear.
No offense to baseball, but hockey. Go Kings. Question. Any other questions? I don't know.
We'll take like one more question. If that's
One. It better be a good one. I'm just kidding.
We're not gonna have another question.
Yeah,
That's
that's
scary.
Yes.
Are any of your scenes based on real life or real things that really happened to you?
Really happened to me.
Yes,
Or someone you know?
absolutely.
I mean, this whole book is based off of a family story. The part where someone dies, but let's pick a
the
silly
sad part. The sad part. Well, I had just moved to Maine when I was okay, it's not a true story, but I had just moved to Maine when I was writing this book, and this book is set in Cornwall, which is on the coast of England. Okay, fun fact about Maine, the seagulls are horrifying. I'm from Florida. The seagulls are cute in Florida. They're like the size of pigeons, are a little bit bigger. They're like not intimidating. I'm not worried they're going to eat my cat for a snack. No, the seagulls in Maine are like the size of a dog. Like they walk around. Oh my god, I was swimming in the ocean the other day and one was just bobbing near me, and I was like, I had an eye on it the whole time. I'm not those little things getting close to me. So every time someone came to visit me in Maine the first year I lived there, they'd be like, oh, what's that? Oh my god! Yes, seagull, welcome. Isn't it charming here? So I had this in mind as I was writing my little seaside book, and I was like, I'm gonna give my hero a deathly fear of seagulls.
Oh my god.
So yeah, my books are really based on real life.
So I would say my next book, well, that's called The Local, is the main character has ADHD, as I obviously also do. And so she's probably the character that's most, like my best friend was like, this is just you, right? I was like, no, I'm not a traveling musician. Yet. So there's a lot of things that happen to Rain that have also happened to me. She shows up in one scene, she shows up to work without her shoes. Granted, she lives above the pub, so like, fair. I showed up to work without shoes when I was teaching at a middle school. Like a few weeks before that, someone came into my classroom and was like, why do you just have like a pair of shoes next to your desk? And I was like, just wait, I'm gonna need them. And the thing is that I don't like to drive with shoes on, like with flip-flops, and it's like, or like flats, and it's like Florida, so it's cold. So, and I just assume that I have a pair of shoes in the back of my messy car. Well, I got to work and I was like, oh, I didn't bring any shoes. Luckily, I had forgotten that pair of shoes at my desk. So, yeah. There are some things based on my real life. Usually the really weird, embarrassing ones. Great last question.
All right, thank you all so much for coming. We'll hang out for a bit and sign books and drink tea and whatever else you want to do. Exactly, thank you. Also, you can pre-order new books through us at the front desk if you would like to. We'll contact you on the publication day and you can pick them up then. But thank you so much to our wonderful authors.
Thank all of you.
Before we all start doing what we're going to do, one more announcement that was spoiled by the sign-up sheet that was being passed around. But Flyleaf will be starting a new romance book club. It will be led by myself and my lovely coworker, Alex. It will be called The New Romantics, and our first meeting will be on September 22nd. That's a Friday at 6 p.m., and we will be discussing business or pleasure.
It's a good one. It's so good.
Thank you. This is so great. I need you here all the time. But yes, come join us. And if you haven't already, we have a sign-up sheet going. You can put your name and your email. We'll have more information down the line. And thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank
have fun.
you guys.
Oh, I'm glad. It's like you're just talking.
I just need to see. I forgot to bring a pen. I didn't bring one. I like to pack them in the case. Yeah, I'll grab it. Thank you.
Get your snack. Just go hide myself at the table.
Hi. Kelly. Hi. Person.
I brought it with this. Thank you. Thrifted.
I'm so glad you remember. I haven't signed this yet. Oh, that's fine. I literally had a moment where I was like, I'm so happy. I feel like
Do you want me to kick this back to the table for you? Okay.
but then it was like, don't be naggy.
No, you're good. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever.
I don't have a pin. So
Okay. All right.
My book club. And they even had. We had so much food that the guys who were bringing like their refrigerator, like we fed them, and they were like, but of course you know they go and the refrigerator loves that. So I went and bought it. I respect them. I was like, they've been my friends for like 20 years.
And they only had
But they brought so much food.
他们想要写一些you're able to do so， 写一些故事，
And so,
然后
alright,
我也是我的 book club，我觉得如果我参加 book club，我肯定读不完。
you gotta take your mom to Creekmore. Have you ever heard of Cedar Creek Gallery? No. I just came from there. So they're having a customer. So they're doing, it's an art gallery and it's a teapot show. They do art, crafts, blown glass, jewelry. But they're doing a teapot show. Okay, no, that would be down there.
那个桌子后面
Teapot show. There's artsy teapots. It's right of 186 in Granville County. As soon as you cross over Granville County, Creekmore, but it's gorgeous.
Where would I choose?
They have, and so if you do gardening, they have really low cost nursery. And but the teapot stuff, it's every 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And so just the garden stuff. So it's customer appreciation. So there's free drinks, free beer, free ice cream treats, the food truck, music.